Can you believe that?
It's only been a little more than 6 months since the PS
Pro launched.
It launched November 7th, 2024.
Seriously, and the past 6 months or so have been tricky for Sony.
Right, their live service push hasn't really quite gotten off the ground. Their output of games has kind of slowed. I mean, thankfully, they've been releasing a lot of their games on PC,
but in some ways,
at least the PS5 Pro has kind of remained a light in the
Sony
hardcore right. The system is extremely expensive. The Pro enhancement rollout has been a little confusing. Their homegrown AI upscaling technology wasn't and still isn't quite as exciting as it could be. There have been some problems. We've heard some fans jokingly describe themselves as PS6 testers, which at this point doesn't seem that far from the truth. There are a couple of sticking points with picking up a Pro, but the PS5 Pro was and still technically is the most powerful console on the market right now. And considering what you're getting, I guess it's still kind of affordable next to a powerful gaming PC. The improvements it makes across the board are big, just on frame rate improvements alone. This thing is still worth it if you are a frame rate junkie. A frame rate counter, a frame rate snob. Certain games are just much more stable on the Pro. It would be very difficult to go back and try to play certain games, like specifically Monster Hunter Wilds. That game on a base system, but in terms of stability of the image and frame rate, it's just a lot smoother to play on a PS5 Pro. When the PS5 Pro hits, it hits specifically with games like this right. Monster Hunter Wilds was the first one where I really felt like, this is good, I'm very glad I have this console. I'm glad I bought this thing. In games where the visual upgrade isn't great, again Monster Hunter Wilds, it doesn't look like a different game right, but the improvements are still noticeable on a good screen. The thing with the Pro is that a lot of the enhancements just aren't the most noticeable. Unless you're a hardcore enthusiast. When you're just looking at screenshots or watching a YouTube video that's been compressed to hell and actually seeing it on a screen, and you'll immediately notice the difference. And while PSR has had its own growing pains, the technology is seemingly rapidly improving right. Certain games that ran or looked not very good at launch, like Jedi Survivor that has been patched and are now just greatly improved as a result. Better performance. It took until January of 2025 for Survivor to finally get fixed up. And it's still not perfect. The game was rough even on a base PS5. And PC performance wasn't great either. The PS5 Pro patch uses the newest version of PSR. And as a result, the image is much better overall. Like I said, when this thing hits, you'll be glad you have one. The biggest downside to the PS5 Pro is that its individual game needs to be patched to take advantage of newer versions of the PSS or technology. This upscaling tech, it's not something that can just get a system-wide update. Each actual game needs to be updated to support new versions of the tech, so actually knowing what has and has not been updated is kind of a crapshoot. It's annoying to really try and gather this all. Websites like Tech Radar are trying to keep track of all the official enhancements. Enthusiast forums like Resetera have what is still the most thorough and up-to-date list of actual PS5 Pro enhancements. This feels like something Sony should be doing on their end. But at least the information is still out there for people looking for it. But again, you gotta look for it if you really care. You gotta do some consumer research. Back at launch, we ran through a bunch of Pro enhanced games to see which ones and in what ways, and that's primarily what we're going to do today. Run down many of the enhancement patches that got released after the launch and when we first covered it, and just see how it all stacks up. Is owning a PS5 Pro more valuable than it was 6 months ago? Well, yeah, absolutely. I'm not even gonna leave that an open question. The obvious answer is yes. It's gotten better overall, but I'll leave it up to you to decide if the situation has improved enough or if it's for the games for you. The Pro came out pretty hot for what was supposed to be this premium system. The use case for it to sell for it didn't feel like it was as absolutely necessary as a PS4 Pro. It was different this time around, and it was then and it still is now. Something that you really gotta look into and if decide it's really for you the types of games you like. Are they enhanced? Is the TV you have good enough to really flex this thing? Because it is $700, enough of the complaining and tech talk. Like, let's get into the actual enhancements themselves. One of the most noteworthy early games that got a big big patch was Gran Turismo 7, which got a support patch on November 21st, just a few short weeks after the initial release. That one came just late enough for us to miss it, so you know, this is what better place to start now, with this game, they give you the option to enable or disable PSR, which is always a welcome feature. And with PSR enabled, it freezes the game up too. Among other things, have ray-traced lighting in car interiors, which is a huge visual difference. The light in car interiors becomes so much less flat, and it's just a lot more dynamic and interesting looking. So if you like driving from first-person interior view, then this is a massive improvement. But it's not perfect because this was like one of the earlier patches. There's still some weirdness with the PSR implementation. It seems with like some noticeable shimmering and artifacting all over the place. Those are really the two biggest issues with PSR. The shimmering effect you see in some games, and some pretty gnarly artifacting that can happen occasionally. At launch, there were a few games that had this bad, but the newer versions of PSR seem to be better about this. It just depends on if and when developers actually patch it into their games. Gran Turismo 7 is mostly a net positive. Little bit of mixed things here. Some enhancements look great, but some things can look a little distracting. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, got a big enhancement patch on April 30th. That bumped the resolution to 0.5 times higher and improved performance across the board. The resolution is dynamic, so it'll drop when things get really hectic, but it'll always be much better than the base PS5's fixed 1080p resolution on the base PS5. The game ran at 60 FPS with some dips, but on the Pro, it's got a stable 60 FPS. This makes a difference in this game's case. The real standout is the improved resolution, which is a significant boost. The game just looks much cleaner overall on the Pro. One game that hasn't been patched, but makes great use of the Pro's power on its own, is actually Assassin's Creed Shadows. A game that could benefit from the newer versions of PSR, because there are still some noticeable performance drops. But even on performance mode, running at 60 FPS with the mentioned occasional drops, the game does have some ray trace global illumination, and it looks absolutely incredible. The base PS5 version doesn't have ray tracing, and it's very noticeable. Just how big a difference global illumination makes, just improving the atmosphere. Do you know the look of the world? The game just looks more dense and just feels more lush with vegetation. It's one of the more alive-looking open worlds in Assassin's Creed we've seen. The frame rate could be more stable, it's otherwise a very impressive showing on the system. On the technical front, the game I didn't really enjoy, but I did really appreciate the benefits of just having this console, right? Because UI interface-wise, it just feels like a PS5. But then every so often, you jump into a new game I got and you go, and I can take advantage of this stuff. And it was a little bit more seamless. And Assassin's Creed Shadows is one of the good examples. Now, along with that on the bad side, the other two clear losers of the PS5 Pro were Alan Wake 2, which had some real rough PSR implementation, and the Silent Hill 2 remake, which you may have seen headlines. It did suffer from similar problems. The situation was so bad with that they actually patched the game to just remove PSR completely. Just a few days ago, the developers released saying that they were still working on a fix, which is good because most people were starting to assume that there was never at this point. But it sounds like it will happen for Silent Hill 2 eventually. Well, that game is mere. Alan Wake 2 did manage to get fixed with a Pro patch released in December that mostly addressed the issues people were having with the game. It now looks much better than it did, with proper ray-traced reflections, deeper shadows, improved foliage, and more detailed environments overall. The only problem is that the frame rate situation is still not necessarily worse than a base PS5, but it's not really a lot better. It's not what we were hoping for. It's something we really hoped the Pro would fix in this situation, because it's really the only major issue we have with the game. So with kind of 2 out of the 3 biggest Pro whiffs mostly being fixed, with fixes eventually coming to the last one, we're definitely in a better situation with the console and the state overall. Of just some big games. One of the more inexplicable games to get the PS5 is the PlayStation release of the Xbox game. Forza Horizon 5, it's a series that we've always closely associated with the Xbox brand. But now they're putting out trailers and showing how the game looks better than ever on the Pro. And they're not joking, the game does look fantastic, with improved detail across the board and better draw distance, all while retaining 2K resolution at 60 frames per second. Other than PC, this seems like the best way to play Forza Horizon 5. And it's quite the technical achievement for a game that just feels kind of weird on PlayStation hardware. Because you're just so used to playing it on Xbox. I get it's like a changing business world, but it's weird. And speaking of other games that have been updated, one game that recently got updated with the newest version of PSR was Days Gone Remastered. And while the PSSR update is good, the games appear more visually clean. There's less instability and shimmering. The actual frame rate seemed like it actually became on balance mode compared to how it was. Pre-patch the game used to hover around 60 FPS on balance. I really enjoyed it, but post-patch, it looks like it dips a little bit. And for frames per second obsessive person, if you're out there like that is no good. The situation with the Pro is still a little bit all over the place. It's a little more complicated to explain. It's not just a resounding yeah. It's awesome some games have gotten updates like Star Wars runs now. Much better after some updating compared to where it used to be. But other games that were like made for the Pro, and by all accounts should run much better, are extremely rough feeling like Elden Ring Night Rain. Shockingly inconsistent frame rate, the good outweighs the bad though. There are many games that look and run really well on the Pro. Some of these we covered back at release, like Stellar Blade and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the Horizon games and stuff, Resident Evil 4, Spider-Man obviously. But it's not all just Sony published games that are benefiting right. Games like Kingdom Come Deliverance to look really good on the Pro. They take advantage with PSS, are doing a lot of heavy lifting with no major visual issues really to speak of. Even with no setting or options to change the Pro settings, you can't even turn off PSSR on the Pro. The game has more detailed models, shadows, better foliage decay, dynamic resolution, and a very stable frame rate with only the most minor dips and to like maybe 50 frames per second. 55 at the lowest, it's solid. The game looks fantastic on the Pro and is a real standout from this year. Another smaller victory for the Pro, actually one of the rare Sony exclusives that actually came out which last has no year. Settings, but does see a lot of improvements on the system. Improved shadows overall, greater detail and crisper shadows, with the dynamic decay resolution generally hovering around 18p rather than the 16. 20p it seems that the standard PS5 version ran a minor resolution but bump. The visuals are just improved overall. So the Pro overall has just been seeing some major improvements in the last 6 months. Many games that had poor performance or looked bad at launch have been patched and improved. It's not perfect, many games only look marginally better, and it still doesn't quite hold up to the visuals a top-of-the-line PC can put out. But when you compare a lot of these games to the standard PS5, the comparisons hold up. Games have more details, run at higher resolutions, and have more stable frame rates on PS5 Pro. It's not like a total game changer. It doesn't feel like this massive leap or something we were begging for with PS4 to PS4 Pro. But if you have the expendable income, you have the luxury of being able to get one of these like a TV or a monitor that can really take advantage of higher refresh rate modes. You're gonna feel the benefits. You're gonna feel glad that you spend $700. This is how we like it. This is how we think it should be. We like the games on the Pro where it just feels seamless. Where if you have a Pro, you fire up a game. It's just better, not a lot of complications, not a lot of frame count. It's just an upgrade. You don't have to be Digital Foundry getting into the researching anything. It's just a game that plays and looks better because you got the better device. So again, the Pro is probably mostly for people who want to get the most out of their 4K or just really obsessed over frame rates. But if you are that obsessive, you might have a PC still 6 months from release. The Pro is absolutely in a better state than it was back in November. It's just a little complicated. We still have a couple of little complaints. Started off with at the top. Ultimately, we still feel similar to how I want the best of the best, and you're willing to pay for it. You do get some nice upgrades. And I still think that stands 6 months later. It's just in better shape. Is it an absolute must-have? Does it change the game completely? No, not quite. But more and more we are glad we bought one. I know that sounds complicated. In my opinion, PS5 Pro is just a complicated console. Either way, that's where we feel roughly 6 months later. Hopefully you can see some of the gameplay on screen. Like I said, YouTube compresses a lot of it, and it's hard to notice a difference. I definitely recommend. I don't know, do stores exist maybe you anymore? Can go to a look store. At one hooked up to a TV, and there you'll notice some difference. Either way, it's fun to talk about this stuff. Thank you if you guys like it. We're not Digital Foundry. We're not counting individual frames and but pixels. We like to go by feel and have some